Why no one wants Itto? When he got released, everyone had a ton of excitement for the one and only, but and a kid so unga bunga, even a pea brain could understand him. Yet he ended up as a noodle, even when compared to feeble scholars. And he has a pretty feeble amount of mains. Yet, why is that? What happened to all the Arataki hype? Why does nobody want to play Itto? That's what I'll be telling you today. Let's get into it. Itto got received decently by the community after he released. There was a Geo renaissance happening during this era, with the likes of Goro's addition to the game and Yunjin's one patch after. For 2.3 standards, Itto held up well and had a satisfying playstyle, yet as time passes, the meta shifts. Standards for DPS characters have increased a lot over the years. Think about why you use DPS characters: damage output and ease of use. Nivelle has both of these in spades. He's the third most used character in the 4.4 Abyss for a reason. What's wrong with his output? Well, let's take a look at his team. A C0 Goro offers very little buffs, contrary to popular belief. He provides Itto as many buffs as a C0 Sara would to Raiden. That's awful. Bennett also generally beats Goro as an Itto buffer. You only use the Dog Boy because he frees up Benny. His C6 is also of a lower quality for a niche support when compared to C6 Sara, who also on top of buffing adds a ton of her own damage in Raiden teams. And then Zhongli. He has an excellent sustain with cool Red Shred, don't get me wrong, but you don't really need this level of sustain in a Geo team, with a depth scaling DPS where you'll be proccing crystallizes against the enemies. Get the point? And usually you avoid using Zhongli's burst in teams because the animation is too long, taking away from potential DPS your teammates could do. But in Itto Geo teams, the cooldowns don't match up harmoniously, so you're forced into using it. Zhongli's main value is his sustaining. His actual buffing capability for Itto is mediocre, so he ends up being a choice because you have nothing better to slot here. Albedo does no buffing. EM Itto, anyone? He adds damage to the team. The damage he does here is quite good, but not enough to save the poor guy. You can argue Geo Resonance at least, but that's about it. Itto doesn't have extremely strong buff sources like Faruzan or Chevrus. And what do I mean by ease of use? Firstly, Itto has a long rotation which forces you to pay some attention. Not expecting that for the Unga Bunga character, were you? You can't simply skill blast, normal 4 times, and repeat like you do with Navia. You need to watch out for when Itto stacks get maxed. Your burst can also run out in the middle of Itto's CAs, so you don't even get a large part of his damage. A smaller point is his energy. It isn't a massive issue, but worth covering. A 70 cost burst, 8 particles during his field time. This is like Xiao's particle generation. But Itto, contrary to popular belief at the time, has more issues. You'd think otherwise because Itto generates particles during his burst and Xiao doesn't. Well, Zhongli generates quite a low amount of particles. He does it unreliably as well. Since his pillar is not always gonna pulsate on enemies, also the 50% particle spawn chance doesn't help his case much more. Side tip, use Fav on Zhongli for more team-wide energy. This will help a bit.
You're welcome.
And Albedo's main source of particle generation can just get snapped in half. Really, your best source of ER here? Favonius Goro. This can make Itto's energy economy surprisingly hard to build around, despite being a triple or quadruple Geo team. Granted, if you can get the right amount of ER rolls, you'll be fine. It isn't that big of a deal. 130% is what you'll need, assuming everything goes his way. But remember, that's on paper. His ER needs might cheat, okay? Doesn't mean it plays well. There's a difference. Plus, he loses energy when you throw beans at him.
Beans, no!
Beans are a great source of protein, but he avoids them, which is why his 3D model is more akin to a noodle. It's a lot of trouble to go through for a character that needs a lot of investment. You can invest far less in the newer Fontaine carries or Dendra team and get a comfortable clear time. 2 qualities Itto should have, he falls short in. But why is it that older carries like Xiao get praised to the high heavens when people saw him as worse than Itto before? What happened? Options, options, options. Itto has hardly any options. Think about it. How much of Itto's actual team composition changed since 2.3? Spoiler alert, they haven't. He's been the same character ever since he released. His state and power level was perfectly acceptable back during 2.3. In fact, he was better than Xiao at the time, who did as well as a Red Horn Noelle. And with enough investment, he was pretty good. But for every new character released, Itto fell further and further out of relevancy. Let me put it into perspective. Dendro, you're joking, right? Farina, no healers. If you want to get technical, yes, C4 Goro has some healing in his kit. Not enough to sustain a team with Farina in it though. Yulan, okay, you'll get the ramping buff, but most of Itto's meaningful damage comes from charge attacks. Yulan does not proc on Itto's charge attacks. Using a tried and true core like Double Pyro, well, looks like Itto's energy economy is gonna get even worse. Also, why even bother with Itto anymore? Using anyone else here would be a far better idea. Linny, Nouvelle, Child, Raiden, you get the idea. The main difference I'm trying to highlight here is indirect buffs. Think about Xiangling for a second. Her own DPS is fine, but it's the 5 stars you pair her with that make her good. And Xiangling, if tagged with Bennett, can suit nearly every new Fontaine character. Best in slot if you have skill within Linny Monopyro. Great for Nouvelle National, Riesling Melt, even Double Pyro Navia if you want. Her reputation is also super high because nearly every new polearm will work on her. Because of this, Xiangling never loses relevancy. She receives an indirect buff nearly every patch. Indirect buffs also heal characters that were completely dead. Diluc is a super recent example. People thought Man was garbage until Xian Yun graced us all. Now, a solid single target pyro plunge option with genuinely good damage. Being able to use new and powerful teammates is a super important thing for a character's relevancy. It keeps their power level up to date with current meta standards, and gives us all more of a reason to play the character. Being locked into the Mono Geo archetype severely limits his choices. The only realistic flex I see most Itto mains use is Fischl for energy. Still not convinced? Noelle! She is the queen of indirect buff. Introducing Goro and Redhorn for Itto? Noelle's favorite. Yun Jin for Yoimiya? More like another Noelle double Geo partner. And our lovely Farina is so much better utilized with Noelle. She drives her teams as a team-wide healer or use Farina to boost her own hypercarry DPS. And in both ways, managing to outclass Itto. Dude got shoved up by an essentially free 4-star. Numero uno Itto, more like uno reverse Noelle. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, why not consider liking, subscribing, maybe even leaving a cool comment down below. If you don't, then this will be in your bed tonight. For real? Time to address the mega large beetle in the room. Itto is Geo. That in of itself isn't the problem. Navia has proven that you can be a Geo unit and not suck, and Noelle is perfectly fine enjoying her element and what she skills on. Let her take advantage of all the current buffs she has. The issue is that Itto doesn't use Geo. Maybe that's because of his single DVD screensaver brain cell. We already know that outside of Navia, Crystallize sucks. Let's discuss something more interesting. There are only 2 enemies in the game you actually want to use Geo on. The Golden Wolf Lord and Geo Rift Hounds. Itto was selling the solution. Except now we have many better solutions. And even so, such enemies are rare and hardly appear in Abyss, which is the only content where you actually care about what you're bringing to the table. So anytime you use Itto, he is only a brute force carry, in the same way that Eula and Navia are. Ah yes, Eula, didn't that go so well? It's fine, end of user license agreement. I still think you're cool. He gets outperformed in these roles. Okay, he'll be better than Eula, but that is the absolute bar of performance to beat. And Navia fixes anything wrong with Itto, having a much brighter future ahead of her and far better teammates. Which is rich, considering Navia has no actual teammates yet. Which is also rich, because look at where she lives. His low flexibility doesn't help either. You can't slot him at the back of any team and expect him to do well. Which sucks for him, considering that's exactly what his direct competition can do. And do it well! Itto does have decent AoE, but that doesn't matter with units like Xiao and Nouvelle being at their peaks right now. Plus, far cheaper AoE options are available. It doesn't help that Itto wants high investment. He's a hyper carry, I won't fault him for that, rather I will point out this. Since I've mentioned Xiao so much in this video, he will be my test subject. Itto wants C6 Goro for competent buffing. Xiao wants C6 Farazan for extreme buffing. Itto's best sub DPS is Albedo. Xiao's is Farina. Itto Sustain, Zhongli, offers more broad universal buffing, not tailored to him. And cons which are... Who on earth has Zhongli cons? Xiao has Xianyan, who offers specialized, powerful buffs. She's excellent at C0, and her C2 is totally cracked. Expense is not a bad thing if the end reward is worthwhile. So you tell me, whose expenses are more worthwhile? In the end, Itto couldn't keep up with rising standards. His future-proofness had a bleak future from the beginning. Teams with no reliance on reactions that lack solid buffing. In the years that have passed since his release, the poor dude hasn't received any further buffs. It's a shame that things turned out this way for the guy. If a really good geocentric support came along that made Mono Geo worth playing, Itto would finally have a place again. Alas, he is another DPS, lost in a sea of many. Play Itto if you want to, of course. He's still a funny man and will serve you well. You don't have these problems together prove why no one wants Itto. Feel free to leave your opinions down below in the comments. Be respectful. Well then, this has been Juice, signing out. And I wish you all a day free of bean allergies.